My friends, I felt like I was doing silent movies here, but let's get started, okay? An American military plane landed in Russia yesterday, and inside it was the head of the CIA. The trip wasn't announced by anyone, not before or during, no statement, no official photo, nothing on the schedule. The ones who found out were the websites that track flights, like the ones we always follow here, Flight Radar for example. And both governments only spoke up after it was already in the press, and he made the return trip on the same day, just a few hours after landing. It's the first time that the head of American intelligence has gone to Russia in this position. And it happened exactly 24 hours after the United States announced the largest sanctions operation in history against Iran. And I got this today, my friends, from dozens of people, through messages in the comments of the latest videos, with a single question. They're already saying, at least out there on the other side of the world, that an agreement has been reached between Russia, Iran and the United States to end this war. And I'm going to explain to you in this live stream what this trip is and what it isn't, and the real reasons behind it. And there's another theory going around, even stronger, that I'm also going to debunk here with real numbers. It's the one that says the Americans and the Iranians are secretly working together to suffocate China. The absurd things I hear, and I want to know your opinion here. Write here in the comments if you also heard these two theories today and if you believed in any of them. And then I'll take you to the sea, because yesterday satellite images from the Gulf of Oman appeared that explain how the world is breaking through the Iranian blockade. There are 15 pairs of ships alongside each other in the middle of the ocean, and 25 million barrels of oil being transferred from one ship to another in a single day. There's oil from almost every country in that region in there, from almost all of them, except Iran. Iran is not part of this. And there are still 3 more topics in this live stream. Qatar's gas dropped by 96. And Turkey will probably panic as winter approaches there. And you'll understand the reason for that in just a moment. And the American ambassador to Lebanon said something about Israel that I didn't expect to hear, reporting directly from Israel, right from where everything is happening, organizing as always the chaos of information for you. Local time, 2 o'clock in the afternoon here in Israel right now. So, leave a like now, especially because in the first version of this live stream, it was like a silent movie. So, smash that like button, I need you to leave a like. Even if you never leave a like on this video, do it now at the beginning so you don't forget later, because usually when YouTube sends 2 notifications, it ends up not sending the second notification as it should. Also check if your subscription is still active, and if you're not subscribed, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell, because 50% of the people who watch my videos aren't subscribed to the channel. So do your friend here a favor and subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell, alright? Let's start here with the trip and let's go through the facts. 1. Far from what was reported in the articles. The plane was an American military cargo plane, one of those big ones, you know, those huge transport planes. It took off from the airbase next to the American capital, the same base that serves the president and high-ranking officials. It flew to Latvia, stayed there over the weekend, and yesterday morning it went on to Russia. It landed at the airport in the Russian capital that serves both civil and government flights and flew back out that same day. The Latvian government confirmed that the flight was authorized in their airspace, but said they couldn't provide any more information because that plane wasn't theirs and they didn't know exactly what was inside. The CIA did not comment, the White House did not comment, it was the American press that confirmed with a government source that the head of the agency was inside that plane. And today the version from the other side came out, which is the one I'm really interested in. The spokesperson for the Russian president said that the trip was about contacts between intelligence services. That's all he said. No details, no agenda, no list of who was in that room. And he made a point of saying that there was no meeting with the Russian president and that there wasn't any kind of meeting with him planned either. Just pay attention to the sequence of the day, because that's important too. In the morning, journalists asked that same guy about the American plane that had just landed, and that same spokesperson replied that the Russian government had no information at all about that flight. Only later did the explanation about the intelligence services come out. Someone who knows nothing in the morning and explains everything in the afternoon has known for a long time. They just couldn't, shouldn't, or weren't authorized to talk about it in the morning. And on the Russian side, there's a theory circulating about the reason for the visit, and I'm bringing it up because it came from there. Like I told you, I always bring you information and get it straight from the source, right there in Russia, if needed, and I share the version that makes the most sense. The independent Russian press, because that does exist there, suggested that the trip might be related to the release, the exchange, of an American citizen who was convicted and imprisoned in Russia. This is not confirmed. Again, this is just a theory, okay? It's a hypothesis from a Russian journalist, and I'm mentioning it here as a hypothesis, but it does make sense within their logic. Prisoner exchange is exactly the kind of issue that's handled between intelligence chiefs. Maybe it's a special prisoner who requires the intelligence chief to go there and talk about it. Now let's talk about what this trip is not. There is no finalized agreement between Russia, Iran, and the United States, as is already being rumored out there. There was no Iranian at the table, there was no announcement, and no one from the American government said what it was about. And then the internet did what it does best. It combined a secret trip with the sanctions package from the previous day and made up a peace agreement. But now, what is reasonable to assume, and I'm marking this as an assumption, pay attention, is that there are matters that justify sending the head of intelligence in person instead of handling it over the phone. The first is Ukraine, because the negotiations over there are stalled, and the two American envoys who were supposed to go to Russia postponed their trip. And the second is precisely Iran. And here comes the right question, what you're probably asking yourself right now, right? Russia. What does Iran have to do with it, right? Hasn't Russia been under sanctions for years? What's left for the Americans to threaten over there? And that's a very good question. And the answer changes the way we look at this trip. The threat of new sanctions, in this case, is hardly going to work. You're right about that, it has nothing to do with it. But the conversation with Russia about Iran isn't about threats, it's about business. Russia and Iran are direct competitors in what they sell. Both of them rely on oil and gas, and both sell at a discount to the same clients in Asia. And this part here is the interpretation of these Russian sources based on what the market shows. Every Iranian barrel that leaves the market means one more customer for Russia and a better price for Russian oil. In other words, squeezing Iran is good for Russia's finances. And this is already happening in practice. So the topic in that room isn't about punishing Russia, it's about asking how much it wants in order not to save its neighbor. And there's a second part to this conversation as well, which is technical. Iran depends on Russia for things you can't buy just anywhere: military components, support for its space program, and political backing in the UN Security Council. And none of that, I don't know if you know, but none of that involves the dollar. In other words, it's free from sanctions. And that's why none of this is solved with sanctions. This is settled in a closed-door conversation between two intelligence chiefs, with no paper and no microphones. And that's why this conversation couldn't be done over the phone. And there's a third possible subject that almost no one is mentioning. The American press has published in recent days that the United States collected information about Russian plans to test the response of the Western alliance in Europe. You must have read that somewhere. If this was on the agenda, the trip has less to do with the Middle East and more to do with the European continent. Russia would be willing to attack a target in Europe to test this alliance. That's intelligence information. This also circulated here in Israel. And I note here the three possibilities, and I don't choose any of them because no outsider knows exactly. But I brought all of them here for you. And look at the detail that catches my attention in this whole story. They sent the intelligence chief and not the foreign minister. Any matter that goes to the diplomat's desk becomes a statement immediately. A matter that goes in the intelligence chief's briefcase doesn't become news at all. And that's exactly why he went. And it was him and not the foreign minister. And it's not the first time this has happened in this relationship. An American intelligence chief has been sent to Russia before, not this one. In times of crisis, he goes precisely to say in person what no one wants to put on paper or say over the phone. Because we know that a phone call can be intercepted. Someone on the other side could be listening. It's the channel that both countries keep open even when everything else is closed. And now, why does this matter to you who follow the Middle East? Because Russia is currently one of the last economic gateways that the Iranian regime still has. The two have signed a partnership agreement and, if you didn't know, they've exchanged weapons. And the Iranian drone that's flying over Ukraine today came from this relationship, the Shahed. If the Americans convince the Russians to turn off the tap, the noose tightens a bit more for the Iranians. If they don't, the regime gains a lifeline. And that's what was at stake on that plane, probably with or without an agreement. And now I'll take you here to the sea, which is where this story comes into view. Let's take it easy here, because this part is actually a bit of a real lesson. To understand what's shown here, look. I'll play the video here, not this video, hold on. This one, okay? Let's understand what's happening here. You need to know two things. First, a giant oil tanker costs a fortune, guys. It carries more than 2 million barrels in its hold. More than 2 million barrels of oil in its hold. Losing a ship like this isn't just losing a ship, it's losing an entire floating refinery with cargo inside. Just imagine. Second, Iran threatens to attack anyone who passes through the strait without following its rules. And despite everything the regime has already lost in this war, these capabilities still stands. They lost their navy, they lost a good part of their air force, and they lost their weapons factories. But they still have short-range missiles and drones to use against ships, and that doesn't require sophisticated technology. And it's this part of the arsenal that still makes ship owners think twice before crossing the Strait of Hormuz. Now, put it together, look, I'll show you this other image here. Put those two things together and you understand the problem. Nobody wants to put a ship carrying 2 million barrels in front of an Iranian missile. And the solution that came up is the one you see in these images now. Small ships cross the strait with their transponders turned off, meaning they're invisible to regular tracking. That tracking we always follow here on the channel, let me show you here. This one, okay, these are ships with their transponders on. It's a little device inside that shows the real-time location of the ship. So these smaller ships cross the strait with their transponders turned off, invisible to regular tracking. They leave the strait on the southern side, right along the coast of Oman, far from the Iranian side. And once they're outside, out of Iranian reach, they pull up alongside the giant ships that are waiting in the Gulf of Oman. And that's where the transfer happens. One ship right next to the other, in the middle of the sea. The oil goes from the small ship to the big one, and the big one continues on to the rest of the world. This is called ship-to-ship transfer, okay? And look at what this operation does to the Iranian threat. The expensive ship never enters the risk zone. The cheap ship goes in, and it does so almost invisibly. And I say almost on purpose, because radar can still see a ship at sea, even with the transponder turned off. But seeing depends on having the radar working. And that's exactly where the regime is falling short, and we know that. A good part of their coastal radar network and patrol vessels were destroyed in this war. Without those eyes, what's left is to look for a small ship in the middle of a sea full of small ships. It's tough, isn't it, guys? If Iran hits them, the damage is also just a fraction of what it would be. And the world's oil keeps flowing through the strait. That's how Iran's leverage in the strait keeps melting away. No shots fired, no headlines, and no speeches from those loudmouths on the internet. And just look at what's at stake in these waters. Before this war started, almost a fifth of all the oil and liquefied gas on the planet passed through there, every single day. It was the world's energy artery, and the Iranian regime knew it. That's why they bet everything on that card. Close the strait, the world panics, and someone comes running to negotiate. But the world did panic, we know that, right? But the world also adapted. First came the military escort, then came the route through Oman, and now there's this transfer in the middle of the sea. Each of these adaptations takes away a piece of the power that the regime thought it had. And now, why did the Americans organize this operation the way we're seeing here in these images? Why? There are four main explanations. The first explanation is the most obvious. It's pure risk reduction. Less exposure, small ship. Insurance is cheaper, and the ship owner is willing to return to the route. It's a small ship. The second explanation is about information. A small ship without a transponder is hard to track. Iran loses the ability to know what's passing through there. And whose cargo is that? They don't know exactly who it belongs to, which country's cargo is passing through at that exact moment. It complicates their situation. If you can't see the target, you can't choose the target. The third explanation is political, and it's here. It's actually the one I think is the strongest. Keeping the oil flowing. It keeps the price per barrel down, and the low price is exactly what the American government needs most right now, at this very moment. Look at the price per barrel right now, $86. Yesterday, during our last live, almost at dawn, here it's already 1 in the morning, it was already at 88. In other words, it dropped even more. It's dropping, which means it's working. What the Americans are doing is working, keeping the oil flowing safely. It keeps the price per barrel down. The price is down too, and the low price is exactly what the American government needs right now. I've already told you here, the election is coming, right folks? And expensive gas doesn't go well with that. They need to bring it down immediately. And there's a fourth explanation, which is the long-term one. Every day this operation works, the strait becomes a little less important, and the day will come when the world learns to live without depending on that passage. And it will happen. That should come soon. There are rumors that pipelines are being built, right? And others are already finished, in the Gulf region, to transport the oil. Instead of taking it out through the Strait of Hormuz, you would cross this whole region here in Saudi Arabia, all the way to the Red Sea. This is already happening too. There are already some. and others are being built, while we're talking here every day in our live streams. In other words, Iran loses the only card it still has in its hand. It loses everything. If this explanation is helping you understand what the headlines don't tell you, leave your like now. I think I deserve your like. It just takes a second, guys. Just a second. And the mortadellas. Leave your dislike too. I also thank you from the bottom of my heart. And now I'm going to talk about the theory that's also circulating widely on social media. A lot of people sent it to me today. The theory says the following. The Americans and the Iranians would be secretly working together behind the scenes. The goal, pretty surreal theory, right guys? The goal would be to suffocate China by cutting off the cheap oil that sustains the Chinese industry. And in this story, Iran would be accepting the role of the villain to get something in return later. That's a heavy conspiracy theory, huh guys? I'm going to give you my opinion here, loud and clear. This is wrong. This isn't real. And look, I believe in a lot of conspiracy theories, but that one doesn't make any sense at all. And I'm not going to tell you this just based on a hunch. I'm going to give you numbers. Before this war, China used to buy more than 80% of all the oil that Iran shipped. To put that dependence into perspective, Iran's biggest customer was China. And Iran was China's cheapest supplier. And now, look at what has happened in the last few months. In July, China was buying about 823,000 barrels of Iranian oil per day. In August, that number dropped to around 534,000 barrels per day. And the independent Chinese refineries, which were the biggest buyers of Iranian oil, have already turned to another supplier. And here I want to be precise with you, because there are nuances in this data as well. What is confirmed is the purchase of oil from Brazil, of all places. Did you know that? So, from Brazil, and also from Iraq. A major Chinese refinery, together with state-owned companies there, has already closed at least one deal. 8 million barrels of Iraqi oil for immediate delivery. And they leave the region in this way, in the same way, okay? So these are real numbers. Market analysts say that these refineries will need to buy even more Russian oil to be able to balance the books, because their stock is falling. In other words, China has already solved its problem, and it solved it by buying from somewhere else. The one left without a customer was Iran. China didn't run out of suppliers. And there's another detail that completely disproves the theory. The oil that appears in those satellite images comes from almost every country in that region. This, folks, comes from almost every country in the region. And it goes to the whole world, including Asia. If the plan was to strangle China, the Americans wouldn't be helping to take 25 million barrels out of the Gulf in a single day. They would have shut it down for good. For good. No one goes in and no one goes out. They would be doing exactly the opposite. So here's what I say. There is competition between Americans, right, and the Chinese. We know that, and it's real, and it will probably last for decades. But using Iranian oil as a weapon against China, it's a plan that was doomed to fail from the start, because the Chinese buyers simply switched suppliers. And who's paying the price for this? It's the Iranian people, not the Chinese industry. And there's data that really seals this line of reasoning. China stockpiled oil for months. Before and during this war campaign, this whole war that's still not over. And they managed to accumulate more than 1 billion barrels in China's reserves. While the world was debating about the strait being closed, the Chinese were there quietly, silently filling up their tanks. Whoever prepares with 1 billion barrels in storage isn't being strangled by anyone here. They're waiting for the dust to settle to buy at a lower price. And that's how China operates in every crisis. I've already explained this to you here before. While others are fighting, they buy. While others are spending ammunition, they sign new contracts.
They're not allied with anyone in that conflict, and they don't need to be. What they want is cheap energy and open ports, and they get both, because the world is always fighting.
Now let's talk about gas, because today some numbers came out that I also need to show you here. It's important. Qatar is one of the largest exporters of liquefied natural gas in the world. And let me explain real quick what this liquefied gas is. Why, right? Because a lot of people hear the acronym and don't even know what it is. Natural gas in its normal state, as a gas, takes up too much space to cross the ocean, so it's cooled down until it becomes a liquid. It shrinks hundreds of times in size. And then it fits inside a special ship, those that look like they have reactors on top, nuclear ones, several reactors, 3 reactors, so that's the ship. When it gets to the other side, it turns back into gas, and it goes into the pipes that heat everyone's homes. And it powers industry. This is the product that makes Qatar rich, and it's what stopped coming from there. And in the last 6 months of war, Qatar's gas exports dropped by 96%. That's a huge amount. And during this period, only a few shipments were leaving there. Only 18 shipments of gas. In the same period last year, there were 509 shipments. The loss amounts to $24 billion that Qatar failed to earn. And here I need you to understand what this means, because it's not just about spreadsheets, folks, because this is important too. This is the money that funds the propaganda machine against Israel spread around the world. It's them. It's the money for television networks, for donations to universities around the world, for lobbying offices, for campaigns on social media. And it's also the money for those little bots that pretend to be paid shills here on the channel, those fake profiles that show up here in the comments of this live stream from time to time, right? They're people. They're not real, folks. They're fakes. They're bots. Someone pays for that. You've seen it before. An account created last week, no photo, or with a photo, no history, repeating the same canned phrase across every channel that talks about Israel. You must have seen it here on our channel several times. That's not people with opinions. That's a paid service, and someone pays for that. When the gas tap is turned off, paying these people gets harder. Less gas sold means less money for that. And the budget cuts over there have already started to show up. Over in Qatar. And look who's filling the space that Qatar left. The United States has increased its gas sales. There's always a side that comes out ahead, right? But this story has a third side, and it's not good. Europe's gas reserves are low right now. And winter is about to start over there. The ones who will pay a high price for heating in the coming months are ordinary Europeans. And speaking of gas, there is another country in this story that I've been following with you for a long time, and that's Turkey. Turkey is Iran's third largest trading partner, with billions of dollars in trade between these two countries. And more than that, Iran supplies 13% of all the natural gas that Turkey consumes comes from Iran. With the sanctions that were announced the day before yesterday, Turkey has been put in a situation where it would have to choose a side. Either it cuts this trade with Iran, or it risks becoming the target of American sanctions. And look at the irony of this story, right? The Turkish president has spent the last few months giving speeches about leading the Muslim world and speaking out loudly against Israel. I'll bring you Erdogan's latest statements about Israel in the next video. He spoke several times, practically talking about conquering Jerusalem. And now he finds out that heating the homes in his country is tied to gas from a regime that's being isolated by the entire world. Talk is cheap, gas in the winter isn't, and Israel also has gas in the region, just leaving that here. Just to make it clear for you, and it's a lot of gas. And look what happens if Turkey really cuts off that gas. That country already has high inflation, for years, and energy is a big part of any family's expenses there. Suddenly losing 13% of the gas means scrambling to find a substitute, and gas bought in a hurry always costs more. In other words, who's going to fill this first? It's not the presidential palace, it's the Turkish housewife. And that's the effect that almost nobody shows when they talk about sanctions. Now let's move on to Gaza, where there was news today on two fronts. Very different. Let me remove this image that's repeating too much here. Okay, I'll put this one here, right? Now, let's go to Gaza. For those who asked about the planes, just a second, guys. The planes are here. Look, they're still operating. How long will the United States keep this operation going like this? Right, guys? They're still operating here, maintaining the security of this passage, of these small ships. And now they're a little farther away, close to the Strait, to the Gulf of Oman here, in this region. Exactly, maybe. To defend these ships that are doing this kind of transfer there, in real time, there in the Strait of Hormuz, or near the Strait of Hormuz. Let's go to Gaza now. Gaza. Yesterday there was news on two fronts, very different ones. The first is about a lie that I've been exposing here on this channel for over a year. The American ambassador at the United Nations published today a strong statement about the hunger campaign in Gaza. He said that too many people in the international community spread the lie against Israel that there was hunger in the Gaza Strip. And he cited new data that contradict this narrative. Mr. Mortadella, go read a little and you'll find that. You'll find not only his statement, but also the real data from the UN itself. According to a report he shared, a researcher who coordinated data collection teams on malnutrition in Africa said something striking about the Gaza Strip. She said she had never seen obesity and overweight appear in a place like that. In a place that a year before had been declared as being in a situation of severe hunger. Do you remember that? And I want to be precise here. This doesn't mean that nobody ever went hungry there at some point. Probably at one time or another, for sure. But the way it was reported, that didn't exist. People, food comes in, and a lot of food comes into the area. A lot of food. It means that that declaration of widespread hunger isn't supported by the data that came out later. And it was that statement that went around the whole world and was used to condemn Israel in every forum. That same statement back then. And the data that has come out is giving a verdict on that campaign. The second story out of Gaza is from today, and it's operational. An Israeli drone struck a tent used by terrorists in the western region of Khan Yunis in the south of the Gaza Strip. Local sources report 1 terrorist killed and several terrorists wounded. And it's good to explain why the tent becomes a target. Tent. Ah, but it hit the place with tents. No, people, it becomes a target because it's being used as a structure among the civilian population by terrorists. That's what they do. After the building or tunnel structure was destroyed, the armed people changed locations. He started operating from inside the tent among the displaced population. But these explosions are surgical. Bam! It's exactly there in the tent where he is. Command meeting, weapons depot, observation point. All of that today could be under a tarp. And then the tarp stops being a shelter and becomes a military position by the choice of whoever set up there. And moving up north, there's a statement from Lebanon that I didn't expect. That it would come from there, right? It could have come from another ambassador somewhere else. But from Lebanon, no. The American ambassador in Beirut. He explained publicly why the Israeli attacks continue. Remember, I mentioned here that the attacks are still going on over there? So they haven't stopped. He is explaining this officially here. He said there is still no agreement to stop these attacks. And the reason is very simple. Hezbollah has not disarmed. And then came his important statement as well. He asked, why does the world demand that Israel do everything if the terrorist organization doesn't want to do anything? Guys, the American ambassador in Beirut, not here in Israel, okay? That's a message. It's an internal message for the Lebanese government. And it's also a message for the international press. That's it, guys. And he finished with some information. It's worth keeping an eye on it. He said they're waiting to see what will happen on that summit, right, Antonio? Ali El Tahr. In the next 2 days. That's the name of the summit, guys. Ali El Tahr. That's where probably the largest Hezbollah base is located, down in southern Lebanon. That same summit I already explained to you here in last week's live streams. With the underground complex surrounded. When the American ambassador talks about a 48-hour deadline for a specific place, something is being negotiated. Now, away from the cameras, about that place. I hope it's not the release of those Iranians who are in that location. I really hope so. And here, I'll give you my take on everything I've shown you today, because there's a thread connecting these pieces. Look at the picture that emerged today. Intelligence plane landing in Russia and ship exchanging cargo in the middle of the sea. Guests from Qatar stuck at the port and Turkey worried about the winter ahead. None of these things are gunshots, folks. All of them are moves involving energy, money, and routes. And that's what this war has turned into in the last few months. It's no longer decided on the battlefield, it's decided by who can move goods and who gets stuck, unable to do so. The Iranian regime still has missiles and still has drones, and I showed you that here at the beginning. But its power is no longer in what it can destroy, it's in what it can prevent from getting through. And if yesterday's images are any indication, it's becoming less and less able to stop what I showed at the beginning of the video. If you missed the beginning, go back and you understand what I'm talking about, folks. It's becoming less and less able to stop it, and that's why there was yesterday's attack on the oil tanker. Actually, yesterday it was against an oil tanker outside the Strait of Hormuz. In other words, they're targeting the big oil tanker that's waiting outside. Do you understand? Are you making the connection with what happened 2 days ago, when they hit the engine room to stop that oil tanker in the middle of the sea? Exactly, outside the strait. There's the answer. They already know this is happening and they're trying to hit them there. And some information just came out that confirms exactly this scenario. According to American officials, the Secretary of State informed foreign ministers of allied countries that for now, no new attacks against Iran are planned. This just came out, folks. Marco Urubi informed everyone that no new attacks against Iran are planned, and the dollar, the price of oil per barrel, has already dropped just with this small statement from Marco Urubi. As I already told the media, they are going to drag this out until after the elections, keep the American people happy with the current situation, and just leave things as they are, folks. Leave things this way so they can get through the elections, and after the elections everything starts over again. The priority now, according to him, is something else. Sanctions, naval blockade, and increasing oil passage through the strait. So what does that mean? The American government itself is telling its allies that the current phase is economic, not military, for now. And look at the word that's also hanging in that sentence, for now, okay? You have to understand that. It's not over and it's not now. And I remind you, the 12-day war happened in July, and it took a long time, more than almost 7 months, before the war started again in the region. And now, we've just finished a round practically. We'll probably wait some time after the elections. If Trump manages to win, then this should come back once again. And then comes the question I get every day as well. All of this that's being done, is it going to bring down the regime? I'll answer you with what I really think. I've always said this here, and not just what sounds nice to hear, okay? I don't think it's going to bring down the regime. Economic sanctions don't bring down a dictatorship. The dictatorship doesn't pay the electricity bill, the people do. And what the Americans want with this isn't the end of the regime. It's to bring those people back to the table and make a deal. That's what they want. Preferably, they want this to happen before the American elections. That would be a victory for President Trump. There's a second possibility, and that depends on people, not spreadsheets. Those people inside can go out to the streets again, like they've done so many times before, and this time manage to bring down those in power. I don't know if it's going to happen, I'm not going to sell hope to anyone, but I've already said it here and I'll say it again. As long as this regime stays in power, we haven't won. This war, we're just postponing the next round. And this is where I wrap up with a little Hebrew word of the day. And it's Gav al Gav. Gav al Gav, or Gav el Gav, literally means back to back. It's the term used for transferring cargo between two ships lying alongside each other. Exactly what appeared in those satellite images, and notice the image that this expression conveys. Back to back is the position of someone who doesn't trust the environment around them. Two ships alongside each other in the middle of the ocean, quickly doing what should be done calmly in a port. That's how world trade is operating in this region today. And I'm still here in the Judean mountains, digging up every piece of this story in 5 languages. We can now add Russian too, so we can bring it to you before it turns into a twisted headline out there. So if you've made it this far, subscribe and turn on the notification bell and share this live with your family group, your friends group, your lefty group, because everyone has a lefty group around them. Yeah, the cup is almost overflowing, nothing can stop it. I'm here, Channel Wonder. Thanks, Wilson. Wilson, thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Davi, then there was a Russian spy in Brazil, then the Russian boss. Strange, right? Information being, there are things we can't talk about over the phone. They need to go in person. That's why Netanyahu went to the United States so many times. It doesn't make sense. Why does Netanyahu go to the United States to talk to Trump if he could solve it with a confidential call, those secure ones, where no one can listen, no one can know what's going on, right? Those screens we see in the movies. Why didn't it happen that way? Why does he need to travel there? Because there are things you just can't really talk about that way. You have to talk about this face to face. Materials that need to be delivered confidentially, he needs to hand carry them and not send them over the network or try to talk about it on the phone. And that's probably what happened in Russia too. Does Google take sides? Apparently, yes, right? Expanding Israel's borders needs to be there. Expanding as in widened or acquired? I don't understand. Some. What do you mean you don't understand? Expanding Israel's borders? Israel hasn't expanded any borders. Israel is only inside Syria, inside Lebanon, and inside the Gaza Strip until these organizations disarm, okay? If you see this as the growth of Greater Israel, like some conspiracy theories say that's Israel's goal, the person who says that kind of thing is living in a fantasy world, right? They talk without knowing absolutely anything about what they're saying and have never even set foot in the Middle East. That has never been Israel's objective. Israel's objective is to maintain a military presence in the area where it could be invaded. Any country in the world would do exactly the same thing. My friends, that's it for now. If anything serious happens in the Middle East, I'll come back at any moment. For those who missed the beginning of this live, go back to the start, watch it from the beginning, set it to 1.5 speed. I'm going to need your help this time, folks. Why? Because I did 2 live streams. The first one went wrong, the audio wasn't working, it was a technical problem here at home. So go back, watch it from the beginning, set it to 1.5 speed, and watch it one more time. If you've already watched it, leave a like if you haven't given it yet, and if you haven't watched the whole thing, go back and watch it all, folks. Watch it, it's really worth it, and you leave here truly knowing the information as it really is, from the source, from other places in the world that you don't have access to, right? And you lefties who are learning too, go back to the beginning and watch it from the start, okay? Hugs to everyone, my friends, and see you at the next live stream.